Hakim, how are you?
Oh, I'm very good. I'm very excited to be here with you. I'm excellent then.
Yeah, my last guest, she dropped this incredible phrase where she said, and I said, "How are you?" And she goes, "My state of mind is excellent."
Mm,
And I was like, "Wow, okay,
that's
that's
right.
in the zone. We love that."
Yeah, and that's all that matters, right?
Yeah,
If the state of mind is excellent, you don't really care that much about what's going on around you, right?
beautiful. Well said, sir.
Mm.
And how are you finding your entrance into the community, into the course community through how you're developing things with your book that's on its way, The Eternal Within, which
Mm.
I've read probably three quarters of so far, and it's absolutely brilliant. And also, you've started to do some interviews with some cool cats on your channel. So how are you finding all of that for starters?
Yeah, just to mention, the book is not out as of this date
Hmm.
for the people listening, but it will be out. It's just a matter of weeks, really.
Wow.
But to answer your question, I find it very exciting and welcoming, and it's like if you do something, you take something as far as you can,
Hmm.
and you're open-minded. Uh, that's when life really. I think life gives something back, but if you live with a kind of reservoir, you keep things like you don't go 100%, and you're always you always have this what if, and you know but I would encourage anybody to just whatever you like to do, try to go take things as far as you can, be as total as you can in one thing. Don't half how what do you call it, half do anything,
Mm.
go 100%. Just watch out for your expectations, and yeah, things will happen. I mean, I go to work and I have more energy on all of suddenly,
Mhm.
and I'm more firm in what I believe. I don't know why, you know. So, and I think A Course in Miracles is very much about, as you started out, you said the inner state, right?
Mm.
But um, if we really do the work, it will come out at some form, because this physical experience will have its effects. I think the course says something about, you know, I, I'd, I'm not going even to paraphrase it, so never mind. But about all thoughts have some produces form at some level. You
Yeah.
know that goes for right-minded thoughts as well.
Mm.
So right. Yeah.
So you're seeing the effects of the sort of energy uplifting you in daily life because you're pursuing this dream and it's coming to its fruition. In a few weeks, we're going to have the first book by you.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, s- let's say you have two lives. Like I had my book and I wrote it, and it was actually three books because I just kept adding things on. I
Mm.
thought it was one book. Then when I was completely finished, I thought, nay, I realized this must be three books because it's just too much.
Right.
Each chapter was one file, so I just kept adding on. It doesn't, so it became so it has taken me many years and a lot of energy to that have gone into this book. And so imagine, I have my work and I have this kind of effort with my books, right?
Mm.
So to see those two worlds become one,
Mm.
that's amazing because, before that it was like you're at work and you still have that other kind of life, and to see everything merge and become sort of one, if I may, it's always exciting.
Yeah, I can relate to that in the sense of the music as well. For me, of like finding a way for the music to facilitate that same passion and to be a vehicle for the love of the course and to, connect the people who also want to read into my music in that way, if you like.
Right. And it's a form of self-respect, like spiritual self-respect. We take responsibility for the impulses that we have.
Mm,
We let's say let's, for the sake of this conversation, assume that it's always right-minded, right?
mm,
So we have the right-minded impulses, and we take responsibility. We don't, downgrade it or say, oh, it's just music or it's just a book. No, we respect it, and in that way, I think all the spiritual stuff and our life,
mm,
um, they get aligned.
mm,
The Holy Spirit won't just leave us out in the dark. You know, we have right-minded impulses that will affect what we do here in this life.
mm.
Nothing wrong with that, right?
Not at all. Elevate is the word that I came into my mind when I was listening to you say that.
Right. Yeah.
And I tell you what, I did find myself, I found myself sort of considering the bravery in like what you're doing. So writing a book about your own understanding of the course. I mean, my experience would be obviously I've done that with the concept album with music, and it's kind of very poetic and it's very spacious. It doesn't have to be very detailed. It's almost from my artistic leaning, I prefer the ambiguity so that people can interpret it in their own way. Um, but with such an earnest and dedicated community as course students, and it can be very cerebral as well. It's such an intellectual read, isn't it? It's like
Mm.
I think it's really brave to do a book about the course because, part of your thinking, whoever you are, is going to think, should I put this out? Do I know enough? Are people going to go, well, I understand all that because I've got the course, it's like, I think it's really, really brave. And I think it's going to be something that people can really benefit from as well, from what I've read so far, because yeah, it's a
Mm.
really, really great piece of work. So,
Right, and thank you for saying that. But the thing is, it's the whole book, the ideas, and even the phrases sometimes that I use, and I say this at the beginning of the book. It's almost everything Kenneth Wapnick.
mhm,
Did I say Kevin Wapnick? Kenneth Wapnick. It's all Kenneth Wapnick. It's just that you know I I always felt that I wanted to structure uh, all my insights from Ken
mm,
in a way that's almost, you could say, very organized for a newcomer,
mhm,
right? While still not just being a very, I would say that I take it more than just the basic stuff. I
mm,
go to some great detail in stuff, but I take the things that I find matters a lot, and I structure it in a way that it will all be cohesive and you will understand it all. Uh, the further along, like everybody knows that if you know about the course, you know that it's about forgiveness. But forgiveness, it's one of the last chapters in my book. So how come? Because I find that it's necessary to understand other things first.
mhm,
Why the problem is the problem. Then you understand why the solution is the solution. And then
mm,
the solution, when you hear it, it will almost be, apparent, it will be logical, but but with that said, I would like to say that serves a purpose: organization, structure, understanding things linearly.
mm,
But eventually on the spiritual road, we have to let go of the structures as well. You know, we have to. It's like music. You know, if somebody asks you what do you do in the studio, sometimes like, man, I have never thought about it. Just let me play my guitar. You know, it's not so structural. You know, so we have to allow for that free flowing as well. But I like to organize the things that are my insights from Ken and uh, and I like to, you know, not you know, I'm half Arabic, I'm half Egyptian, half Swedish.
Wow.
So with Arabs, it's yalla yalla. You know, everybody knows what that means, right?
Okay.
It's you're hurrying things, and that part of me is I would say, you know, I have a lot of respect for the reader, so I feel like I structured the book that I'm not trying to take too much of the reader's time. I want to make a point. Once I made the point, I'm out. Then I
Mhm.
go to the next stuff. Because sometimes when I read stuff, it's okay. I got it. Come on now. You know, I have this yalla yalla thing.
Yeah.
It's that's exciting for me how to put a material that you try to, you know, make it compact and I think you get what I'm saying, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and also what's coming to mind listening to you express that is also, conversations that you and I have had before, and kind of ongoing discussions between us as friends in terms of like the reductionism of the course, taking these 1300 pages, taking 31 chapters and reducing it to an unspoken understanding.
Right.
And, again, in my notes, when I was thinking about how much, I respect the fact that you've said to yourself, right, I'm going to write a book about the course and I'm going to present it to the course
Mm,
community. It reminded me of like the journey, the power of simplicity. So, as a musician, so Frank Zappa did something like 84 albums in his life. And there's a song of his called The Black Page. So he was like a classical musician would be able to, he operated like a classical musician could. So therefore, he wouldn't need an instrument. He could be sitting at the breakfast table having for his breakfast coffee and cigarettes most days. And he'd have a piece of paper and he'd be writing out of his music and he's thinking all these things and he's thinking of another line and another line. He's basically putting together this incredible music. And there's one of his songs called The Black Page. And it's called The Black Page because there's very, very little
mm,
blank white left after he's written all of these notes all over there.
right.
Very few musicians can turn that into a an immaculate performance.
Uh-huh.
Um, and yet you'd have a group such as like ACDC, who are like, have done maybe 13, 14, 15 albums of their formula, which essentially from a musical point of view is quite a simple skeleton to the
Mm,
variations, but it's incredibly powerful, and so is Frank Zappa's music. And I think, if you think of the journey from the head to the heart, from knowing, from intellectualizing to silently being, from the journey of the dual perspective of looking at the course, looking at the material, looking at the metaphysics, looking at the mythology of the course, to the point where you're contemplating it, you're turning it all over, then you get it, then you put it into practice. And like you said about forgiveness, it made me think of Bruce Rawls saying, it wasn't until he read Disappearance of the Universe and realized how much Gary sort of said, hey, this is forgiveness on every page, that Bruce then went back to the course and opened it up and went, oh my God, it's about forgiveness on every page. So it is late down the line when
right.
when that penny drops. And then when that penny drops and you realize that you implement this system, you feel more peace and your quality of life goes up, then, you know, there's the simplicity going from the black page to just very simple, you know, very
Yeah.
simple music that's incredibly powerful. And also in that journey, finding the mental context to allow yourself to know that simplicity is incredibly powerful, because the ego
Right.
is going to want to jump in and want to think of like 1,000 words, or it's going to want to, you know, have a like a circuitous kind of explanation for something that really comes all down to just God is, you know.
Right. 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 And you hearing you say that, it makes me think that, uh, like, my book is very, it's true that it's very theoretical, in a sense, because I find that it's necessary, that part, but once that is established,
Mm.
if I would write a fourth book, these three books are, I want, they go from theory to life, to our everyday life. But if I would write a fourth book, I would like to go more in the poetics kind of way, because then the reader will understand what's really essential. Because if you go with the poetic stuff at first, it could be misconstrued also,
Yeah.
you know, you know. So, like, as I said in, here with you, I said, the Holy Spirit doesn't leave us out in the dark, but that doesn't mean that He will pay our bills and make sure everything in our life goes smoothly. So if you have the theory, you would know that, right? But if you just take my word for saying, what I said, you could get the wrong ideas too, right?
Gotcha.
So it's important to have this theory established, also first. I find it,
Yeah,
yeah,
well, of course, if we're going to reference King Kenneth himself,
yeah,
then, you know, and him talking to us about reading the course like a giant poem, you know, that isn't sort of advice or a tool for understanding that he's going to give you on day one of your first ever workshop. You know, that's quite far down the line. It's like, you know, that helps you that helps you to bypass this sense where you would get caught up in cross-referencing and going, well, you know, because we know that the way the material come through, there's a, you know, spoken to in a dualistic kind of way at first, and it moves its way towards the non-dual, because the conversation with Helen develops through that book to the point where it's being articulated in motion, isn't it? You know, so you shouldn't in chapter 11, you know, you're in chapter 11, and that's where you're being addressed to. So you don't need to then go back and go, hold on a minute, what did it say about this in chapter 3 or whatever? You know, it's a
yeah,
journey, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah,
And you know, Ken talking about the poetic aspect is, yeah, it's later in that journey, and then when you do grasp it like that, and the way it helps you to see the mythology, because it's important to remember that the course is just a mythology. It's like, you know, you don't want to get caught up in thinking that the tiny mad idea and the separation and the way that that is articulated in the course is the only way. And we know from the
mm,
manual when it says, you know, this is just a way, this is just one of many paths to the truth.
right,
um, I think it's important to be flexible, to know that this poetic mythology that explains to us the way that we entertained an idea of separation whilst we inhabited that perfect oneness, the awareness of perfect oneness, and then where that took us and the birth of guilt
mm,
is just a story, you know. And sometimes you'll get Ken saying, you know, this is just Jesus's story, this is just Jesus's like fairy tale for us, you know, so that we can get our heads around this.
exactly, exactly. All those beautiful passages about God, taking care of us, embracing us. These are just how do you say, counter arguments for the ego saying, God, it's out to get you.
Mm.
As you said, it's all stories, and but it's helpful stories.
Yeah.
There's a reason why we tell bedtime stories to our kids. The story archetype. If people know about TED Talks, they
Mm.
usually are encouraged to talk from a story, structure,
Okay.
not just go with the information, because I think people, we understand we relate to stories.
Mm.
So if we all believe in the unconsciously in the ego story
Mhm.
of us being sinful for separating from God,
Mm.
then we need another story.
Yeah.
The prodigal son is a good story, as you said. It's not just A Course in Miracles, right? If you understood, if that story could be, I'm sure it could be interpreted in a way that makes you sinful. The ego is ingenious, but yeah, as you said, before A Course in Miracles, I was into non-duality, and I know that you love Rupert Spira a lot. You have a lot of appreciation for him, and I know that when I then came with A Course in Miracles, there was a bit a period of me that was, I didn't understand, you know, because the non-duality part, it was very logical for me,
Mm.
just witness things, right? No matter
Mm.
what happens, just stay and witness. And
Mm.
then forgive, I was like, how does this come together with witnessing?
Right.
Because when you hear forgiveness, like, am I supposed to do it? Where's the doing? But then when you look into the course, what does it say? Forgiveness merely reminds and does nothing, something like that. I'm
Mm.
paraphrasing.
Mm.
That's witnessing.
Yeah.
But why I'm still, after all those years into non-duality, why I still love A Course in Miracles, and I would say that's my path, is because where, let's say, non-duality is a harder path, the Advaita Vedanta, it's
Mm.
actually, for me, I find it's a harder path, because they say witness, right, things,
Mm.
but there's a emotional component to things when we are in conflict, right?
Yeah.
And so while it's still true, you witness things,
Mm.
but A Course in Miracles urges us to have it gives us an understanding of the conflict itself,
Mm.
so it becomes easier to witness.
Mm.
Otherwise, I would feel, at least in my own life, the ego would have too much room.
Mhm.
Oh, but he did that, Hakim.
Mm.
That's wrong. There's no argument. He did that. That was unfair to you. But the Course in Miracles gives me the context
Mm.
to put it all in perspective, so I'm justified in just witnessing, right? So then I can embrace in that understanding. So I love that. And then there's other aspects too, that it deals with resistance, and it's a gentle course. All you have to do in A Course in Miracles is know what's happening. Even if you know that I don't want to forgive, at least you know that. That's very helpful.
Mm.
And Jesus wouldn't push you to say forgive. Just relax in that.
Mm.
That's why, uh, before, when I started out with the Course in Miracles, I saw myself as, some, how do you say, some angry person. I wasn't angry, but I felt like unlovable to the max. You know, I felt, yeah, there's many things, and I felt that A Course in Miracles could meet me. You know,
Right.
it said, "This is why you feel, why you feel,"
Mm.
and it's not a surprise. This is actually what everybody feels. I'm not special and alone in this, right?
Mm.
And then for me, then it's easy to do to do the spiritual work. Once I know that.
That created a shift of a sense of, like you said, you felt unlovable.
Right, because oh, I'm not going to interrupt you. Maybe you wanted to.
No, no. That's,
Uh, yeah, because let's say if you go to a spiritual retreat, chances are, people will smile at you, and it will be very pleasant. But what if you don't feel that pleasant inside? You smile back.
Mhm.
But once the retreat is over, do you still have that smile? Maybe not. Assuming, this is coming from the place where I was, right?
Yeah.
So, well, then let's say I see someone like Ken. For me, it's not like he has a fake smile.
Mm.
He smiles, but his smile is gentle. It's not, for social convenience, right?
Mhm.
It's gentle and it's real. So for me, it's like you could say, now I'm going a bit poetic. So, read between the lines now, but
Mhm.
then I can trust his smile,
Mm.
right? But if this is true, I've been to retreats where I couldn't relate to the people.
Mm.
It was just too much happiness. And it's true. People might hear this and say, but then you have a problem with happiness. But I did.
Right.
I did, right?
Sure.
Because what happens in happiness, my ego can't exist. So I had to this is what A Course in Miracles taught me. I had to reconcile with the fact that perfect love is inside of me.
Mm.
Wow, really? Me? Now? You know what? Here and now. Of this powerful stuff. I mean, Freud said one thing, right? He said something like, imagine what you would do if you were sure that you were loved. I mean, perfectly loved, something like that.
Yes.
And I really believe that, if we were in touch with that, we're lovable beyond a shadow of a doubt. We don't even have to entertain a single doubt.
Mhm.
Is there some truth in this
Mm.
thought that creates doubt?
Mm.
Nothing like that. I mean, our life experience. I mean, we would just go, and the course says something about, walking in a summer day. Do you know that line,
Mm.
right? That
Yeah.
life would be very, very easy in that sense.
Mm.
So every time now I'm going to let you come in. I'm not going to talk over.
No,
You
don't be
probably
daft.
have questions. So,
No,
no, um, yeah, um,
don't be conscious of that. If you're in the flow, just flow.
right, right.
Give yourself permission because, yeah, there's no resistance from this side of the camera.
Yeah, you see, that's what a loving voice says. What you just said. That's what the Holy Spirit says, right? It's amazing. But no, I think my point was I'm done with the point that I was trying to make. It's all right.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's beautiful because that intuitive, the recognition is the recognition of the self, and if you're on a journey to becoming comfortable with your own lovableness, yes, we can see that reflected back at us through the people around us. But that's often quite conditional, and not just conditional in the kind of social use of the word, but conditional in terms of like concepts and constructs of like the love. Why are we all so drawn to the love of our mum? Because the construct of the love of your mum is as close to as unconditional as you're going to get.
Yeah.
Whereas then with your dad, it's more like approval, especially with guys, you're looking for the approval of your dad.
Mm.
um, and it's a different dynamic. We're speaking as males. Obviously for a female to speak about the love of their dad and their mum is a different dynamic again. But this journey is about it's about finding that lovable understanding without there being a world. Lesson 132, there is no world. There's this central lesson that the whole course is trying to teach you, and then when you absorb that and you realize that the cause isn't in the world, it's in your mind, then you realize that the, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? To be able to look at yourself in the mirror and to see the love and to feel the love without any shame and without any guilt, then that's what you see in other people. And, if you're on a retreat and everybody's, a bit too woo woo and like, oh, hello, that in a sense is a construct and a conditional love and
Mm.
within concepts. And if there is no world, if there's no one else, what you're seeing is something that doesn't sit quite right, and there can be more of a genuine, authentic smile for somebody who's sitting in the street eating out of a bin kind of thing, if you think of some of the dudes and the way they live in like India and stuff, where they've
Yeah,
stripped everything back to just breathe in and
exactly,
a diet
exactly.
of prana.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, what I would also like you to elaborate on as well is your driver for talking about unconscious guilt really as well. Maybe you
Right.
could explain, why you have that motivation as an individual to help people to uncover that. Maybe.
Right. I mean, we could say, imagine that you know this, but imagine every conflict we have is actually a conflict with God.
Mm,
You know, we don't see it that way,
mm,
but that's the truth. If there is no world, then
mm,
what's the conflict about?
mm,
It's something else. It's a conflict with God. And that conflict with God, how it makes itself known, because the unconscious doesn't just say, I have a conflict with God and that's why there's trouble and that's why I suffer.
mm,
No, how it makes it all known and how it all becomes real, even though it isn't,
mm,
is the guilt. That's why the Course says, the guilt is the problem. But we don't see the guilt being the problem, right?
mm,
So even if we take something like doing the workbook lessons, we think the problem is I didn't do the workbook lesson, right? No, it's the guilt that you didn't do the workbook lesson, right? So A Course in Miracles, it becomes so easy because every conflict, once we can connect it with guilt, and I love that your question because that's actually one of the main purposes why I wrote the books, because I want to show that I want to connect all the theory, that the intellectual stuff that the Course brings and make it say that this actually works and this is how. We say this is our problem, and now we can see how it's related to guilt.
mm.
And if we feel comfortable in doing that, that we know uh,
The
that connection, we can
connection.
see that connection, it makes us immensely powerful, you know, immensely powerful, Right. That's why, and I actually like that the problem is guilt because it's actually fun, to see yourself being forgiven, and once you smell the stench of guilt, you know that this stench will I know how to handle this stench, and it will be amazing to see the transformation, right? So it's happy. People, we want to be enlightened, right? But at the same time, it's like, nah. Imagine we have popcorn. We say to the ego and the guilt, come on, do the best you can, because I'm here with Jesus and mighty companions, angels. I'm here with Leon. You know, what you can't prove me. The ego tries to prove to me that I'm guilty.
Mm,
Well, try harder,
mm,
because as of now, we recognize that guilt, right?
mm,
And but I'm not enlightened, so I have to say that sometimes we have to remind ourselves once the conflict comes up, we we call the problem for what it is. You
Mm.
know, we have to make that shift, because if we keep the problem in the world, then we try to solve it by means
Mhm.
of the world. You know,
Yeah,
self-help, and oh, there must be something wrong with me. You know, what me? There is no me. You know, there's the guilt. That's the guilt. Right.
beautiful. Yeah, it makes me think of, how in the course it will sort of say, along the lines of like, imagine like feeling the most love you could ever feel, and then multiply that by 100, and then multiply it by 100 more, and you're still nowhere close to the true reality of your being and what God actually
Yeah.
has for you, and just trying to understand heaven as like this perfect oneness, the awareness of perfect oneness, before the thought of guilt entered that tiny little section of the mind. We can't
Mm,
we can't
exactly.
imagine it, not at the
Mm,
moment, but we can
right.
we can understand the mechanics of it. And that's why it'll say in the course, we don't try and teach you about the meaning of love, because that's beyond what can be taught. But what we
Right.
will teach you about is the interference to the awareness of love's eternal presence.
Exactly.
And that interference comes from our investment in the wrong voice in our mind, wrong mindedness, the
Exactly.
decision to side with that voice.
Yeah. And that's why we have to go through the darkness. You know,
Yeah.
we have to. Right.
So I'm going to read something that you've written on this subject because it's particularly beautiful and particularly powerful. So, all pain is the pain of the belief in separation. Pain and fear are synonymous with the willingness to be separate. Once again, if there is pain, suffering, there is no God. If God is, there can be no real pain. We reinforce the idea of the true God whenever we're right minded. If pain can affect our peacefulness, then we're saying that the Course and Jesus are lying. Our real pain is when we push God away, since it is we who deny Him. We can't just as quickly begin to welcome Him back. This is not difficult because it's the most natural and pleasurable thing we can do, but it is difficult for us to the extent that we don't want to let go of our special selves. We will deal with the subject of resistance in the next book. If you don't know how to begin welcoming God back, say, I welcome you, Jesus, God, Holy Spirit. I want to be with you. Let me come into your silent, loving embrace. If you mean it, you will experience it. We will learn more about joining in the last chapter of this book. But there are also numerous lessons in the ACIM workbook to help you with this. But to be a little more practical or direct with all of this theory on pain, you can always ask yourself, where do I withhold love or feel unloved? This approach allows you to home in at the core of the mistaken belief in separation and undo the cause of true pain. It's never the symptoms of pain that pose a problem, but the guilt in withholding or not accepting, stroke refusing love. As egos, we try to keep ourselves in sufficient fear to keep ourselves rooted in the world. Likewise, we want our pain minimized, but not taken away from us forever. After all, pain, suffering, misery, and despair are the greatest witnesses to sin, ego, and victimization.
All right. All right. Yeah. I'm, when you said that you're going to read something from my book, I found it exciting. What part will he choose? And I don't see myself having good parts that you could read up. But you found something. You know, I can't give points to myself, but I found that to be an interesting part that you chose, and it goes straight to the core. I mean, it's a very good section even to talk about here. But so pain, going into pain, it's you can't have separation and attack without something that justifies it all. And from the ego's point of view, or from our human eye point of view, say is the start of everything, and that's pain, right? So when we think about the Course in Miracles, we don't, pain is one of the first chapters in my book, right? So it's because it's so irrelevant actually to consider that, I'm going to say something like, for I was in a stage for many years in my life that I felt like this, that I knew A Course in Miracles. I had heard Ken Wapnick countless times. I had many of his material, but I said to myself, I don't find myself happy. You know, I'm not joyous, right? So, but what that is saying is, I'm still in pain, God. That means your stuff is not working, God. So I use my pain, i.e., not being happy, the pain of not being happy, to say, separation must be real. So then now, as I'm talking to you with this, I can say, look what's really going on. I use my pain to to as proof. That's what's happening. So, I could see Jesus sitting in the back, let's say, if he was there, looking at me like, see how you use your pain
Mm.
of not being, that's the issue. There's an accusation in that.
Hmm.
So we say, that's why, in other words, we could say we're not that innocent when we say, I'm suffering. There's always an accusation involved. There's always a separation involved. So, imagine if there was A Course in Miracles courtrooms, and the judge is like pointing at somebody saying, "You're accusing, you're you're accusing God now," and the person says, "I'm not accusing anybody," and the judge is saying, "But you're suffering, so you must be." You're not that happy. You're not that love. There's so that's why I just want to put pain in the right context. It's not that pain happens to us, it's that we love pain, we use pain, and pain makes is the thing that we could say, look, I'm an innocent victim. What separation, right? So we have to see how we use pain. And does that mean, I mean, uh, physical pain is one thing, right?
Hmm.
But we mean the mental pain first, the suffering. There's pain and there's suffering. That suffering is within our reach, Yeah.
And then we can say, I am the victim of the world I see. I told you, I am separate. Oh.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I purposely asked you that question because, I sensed it from your work. It's like, this is a big driver. That's why I use the word driver. It's something that you want to make clear. And that's the reason that I chose that passage, because that demonstrates the fact that you want to make it clear. And, it's something that jumps off the pages to me with the books that you've written, is like a big part of it is to say, look, the unconscious guilt, let's bring it into the light. Like, let's make it conscious again, because its powers, it's like, again, going back to earlier when we were saying of, how kind of intrinsic and integral to our whole history and structure as beings is storytelling. You know, we love storytelling, and if we're going to tell a story that wants to sort of make somebody feel fear, then we need the shadows. We need the potential for things to be hiding in those shadows so that their fear can be justified, and the fear can be, it doesn't even have to be believed in, it can be just a possibility. You know, maybe there is a monster in the shadows rather than there is a monster. Just the maybe's enough, you know. And then
Mm,
when we realize, like it says in the course, that, you know, that the lamp in me, the light in me and the light in you, the light, it's the same lamp, it's the same light that lights all of the lamps. You know, if we can walk into that shadow with that and go, oh, there's nothing here, there's nothing, there's no monster, it's just a shadow, you know,
mm, mm,
then the unconscious becomes conscious. And I know that from my own journey, from clearing my mind, from clearing the dark corners, it's been
mm,
about walking in there with courage and just going, right, I'm going to go and have a look over there, because, you know, if I don't, then it's going to perpetuate this propensity for my mind to tell me that there's something there to be afraid of. And then
yeah,
if you change the geography from the four corners of your mind to the past, the present, and the future, and the sin, guilt, and fear kind of um, construct, then it's no different to being able to clear the fear of the anticipation of threat and justification for not being at peace, which is exactly what you're talking
mm,
about.
right. And I loved when you use the word looking, because it's one of the first chapters I start with in the second book, and I find that to be, now we're circling back to the beginning, to the witnessing, with
Mm,
Rupert Spira. I find witnessing in A Course in Miracles term, we could just say it's looking, as you said, when you go there with your flashlight, to the dark corners, and when I used pain to further to reinforce separation, and say, A Course in Miracles doesn't work for me, to Jesus, right? It's all just look at that. If we could talk about this, it means that we know how to look at it. So it requires a theoretical understanding,
mm,
but then it's just looking, because one could say, when I said this thing about pain, right? One could say, yeah, but Hakim, what should you do about it? You didn't provide any solution. No, the solution is to see this. How can you say this con game I'm doing, right? I'm how do you say somebody who cheats, right? I'm deluding myself to just see that. I mean, we want to we want to have a solution here and now, instant solutions, and feel good. The course isn't about that. That comes by itself. We just stay and do the work, and that's honesty. A lot about spirituality is just being honest about what you're doing, not needing it to change. Just know what's up. And what's up usually when we are in conflict is that we are afraid. We are afraid of love. We're afraid of disappearing, of leaving our egos. That's it. And what do we do with people who are afraid? Do we Are we kind to them? Are we gentle with them?
yeah.
That's what Jesus is with us, right?
Brilliant. And interesting that, you know, Rupert's part of the conversation, because I was listening to him earlier talking about, he was answering a question relating to how his vocabulary and his vernacular had changed over the years, and how he used to put certain emphasis on awareness, and now it's more about being, or something like that. And he made a point along the lines of saying, if you had a book on journey back to God, I guess. At the end of chapter 1, he was sort of saying, then that's enlightenment at the end of chapter 1. Then the rest of the book is the experience of that, and reducing the vocabulary, reducing the language to just being, and to just you've done the learning, you've sussed it all out, you've brought it to the light, you've seen the mechanisms, you understand it, you are looking at it. And a very important thing that I stress a lot with people is, you won't stop that program from running. All you do is just observe it without being invested in it, without feeling guilty for the fact that it's running, without resisting it, without coming up with some ingenious plan to try and stop it, silence it. It just runs. And, if I'm driving along and I hear my ego make a judgment about someone else's driving, I just laugh and I just think it's funny. It's like, wow, and it's really vicious sometimes. And I think, wow. And it,
My God, you just provided a perfect summary of the whole spiritual work, really. And you gave an example at the end. I mean, that's it. That's keeping it simple, right?
yeah,
Reductionism, right?
yeah, reductionism is really, really important. Let me have a look at my. So, yeah, I mean, a few things that I've got written here is making someone feel guilty grants you power over them. Nobody wants to feel guilty. I thought that is
Right.
that's
So,
an interesting talking point.
right. So that's from when the ego is about to, um, you know, replace all the love that's natural for us. It's going to replace that with guilt. And I'm talking about in the book why it uses guilt, and guilt makes us fearful. It creates an authority that can absolve us from guilt. So if we believe we're guilty, we will listen. It's the quickest way to manipulate anyone.
Hmm.
If you can find what somebody's guilty of, and you can provide a solution, or so I mean you can take them in a direction where you want them to go. Not that we're doing it, but uh, to understand that that's what the ego is doing to us. Guilt has such a powerful influence on people. I think it's because it's, as the course talks about the unconscious mind, it's maybe the most yeah, it's the most, one of the most powerful lures
Yeah.
that we fall into,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, very, 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 very nice indeed. That jumped off the page. And then we've got we undo guilt, we move upwards, a vertical movement in the sense that the shift in perception goes from form to content, wrong-mindedness to right-mindedness. The mind is outside time and space, a journey without distance. God didn't create the world, so who did? Us. No, because it doesn't exist.
Mm.
Brilliant.
Mm.
So we know about your love of Ken, and something that you've spoken about before with me is when Ken says, stay close to the metaphysics. This is something really important to you. I think in terms of straddling that journey between learning the theory and then discarding the theory through realizing it needs to be put into practice, there's still the transition between those two phases. If you wanted to define it like that, the metaphysics is like, stay close to the metaphysics is one of the big keys to being able to transcend that phase, isn't it?
Right. And let's say if we can make overall journey using what you said. So we learn about the metaphysics like straight, from a technical point of view or theoretic point of view. You know, we understand the concepts, but it's hard uh, to bridge it with our daily life, right?
Mm.
But even though that confusion might be there and the challenge might be there to bridge the two, it's still important to start with the intellect, the theoretical understanding, the concepts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not, respect it enough that no matter what you go through, just remind yourself of them and take it slowly. And then you deal with the guilt and the resistance. I mean, the, all these metaphysical concepts, they are there to justify why we can't forgive. So we have to have it, as I said, first as an understanding, not our experience. But then when we forgive, it becomes our experience. So then it becomes clear. So the metaphysics says, you know, the other person doesn't exist as a real person. He's a projection, right? You this is your dream. It's set up that everything here will fail you, right? So once I forgive that, then it becomes very apparent that the other person, it's not really there, and then when you forgive a bit more, you understand, whoa, he's actually exactly as me, exactly as me. I mean, of the things that matters, he or she is exactly like me, right?
Mm.
And then you feel oneness. Think about it, oneness, like oneness here in our lives, yes. Oneness with other people, right? It's a very tangible experience. It can happen, but we shouldn't force it to happen. But we can have that as I said, we just start with an theoretical understanding that maybe they are one, maybe they are not that different, maybe all their negative sides doesn't have to be that real. Maybe it's just fair. Maybe we're all the same underlying that, right?
Beautiful. Let's go to the book again. So I'm looking at the section called The Implications of the Metaphysics, Part 1, Mindlessness. The ego is always afraid because it understands that there's a power greater than itself, the decision-making part of our minds. It always seeks to subdue it, since its very survival depends on our decision maker not changing thought systems. The ego is unaware and indifferent to what the Holy Spirit is, as it doesn't perceive him as part of its own existence. Furthermore, the ego cannot completely suppress the Holy Spirit, even though we split off from him, because it lacks awareness and understanding of him. Given his nature of oneness, which contrasts with the ego. So the ego ends up suppressing the mind instead. In its truest sense, the mind is the aspect within us that holds the power to choose between thought systems and cultivates awareness. While we've managed to push our attraction to God into our unconscious, we can't entirely eradicate it. This attraction represents the most genuine and inherent phenomenon within us. Whether we're aware of 0.00001% of it or more, it can always accumulate, thus triggering a snowball effect. The repression only succeeds by substituting our natural love with the terror of punishment. The ego, in this sense, becomes the original terrorist, coercing its will through threats, yet it covers its tracks by diverting our focus to an external force that doesn't even exist. So, the so called existence of the ego depends on our choosing it. Otherwise, it ceases to exist. The ego needs us to be afraid, mindless, and guilty so that we don't feel the attraction of love that brings peace and happiness. As long as the sun is mindless, the ego can roam freely. When the sun is mindless, he's unaware over having chosen the ego. He listens to a terrible voice and becomes its puppet, believing the words of the ego's constant guilt tripping. Remember, it's not that the sun is being played by an external force called the ego, because the ego is his own desire for specialness. Yet it is an inward schizoid war between the two desires, one that hurts and another that loves. We are thus purposefully born as innocent and vulnerable.
Hmm. Exactly. So that part was from, talking about mindlessness. Um, so just imagine that even the fact that we have a theoretical understanding of what goes on in our psyche uh, is a sign that we're not as mindless as
Right.
as before. So that's a huge. It's a very good sign and something we can be thankful of, and it means we're on the right road, you know. So then the next step, as we talked about, becomes the experience. And the more we forgive, the more the attraction becomes stronger and stronger for love. It becomes more logical to forgive than to resent. You know, at first, forgiveness we could, we're like, yeah, I'm going to forgive you, but you did that, and we still keep the story of victimization alive for a part. But the more we do it, forgiveness, the more we just want to get it over with. We're not even, and this comes from somebody that was huge on analyzing. I wanted to understand everything. I wanted to be clear about things, and now, as you have said, I just want to keep it simple. And I sometimes I don't even like the words, in my book, because too many words. We know that. Let's make it like really simple. Okay, I'm suffering right now. I have a part in this. I can change my mind.
Mm.
How, why, blah, blah, blah. Okay, if all I can accept is I don't like what I feel, this is from the rules for decision, if you know the course,
Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
those that know the course, and I don't want to feel this way. That's a very, I mean, imagine Jesus must be frustrated by saying, like, if we use me as an example, he's like, Hakim, do you suffer? I'm like, yes, but it's how, do you suffer? Okay, yeah, I suffer. Do you want to continue the suffering? Yeah, but he did. Do you want to continue the suffering? No. Okay, so you want to feel better. Imagine, how silly it is. Jesus has to make it clear for us that we don't. Maybe it's a good idea that we don't suffer. Maybe, you know, the little willingness. You know, talk about a miracle from stupidness, right? It's we who suffer. So it doesn't matter even if you don't understand the course. Just understand this. There, there's a shift that could happen. I don't like to suffer. Okay, if you don't like to suffer, if you really don't like to suffer, then don't hold on to the story. That's it. Accept anything else. You know, it doesn't even have to be a Course in Miracles. You know Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, you can learn from him. He's an excellent. I mean, where in that TV program does he accuse anybody? You know, and this comes from a guy that doesn't wear underwear. He just wear a red shirt, and he's more, such a good example of innocence. But uh, I just like that. Okay, I must be wrong. That's it. That's if I swear if that was all I learned from one lifetime, I'm super happy. I mean, such a simple and it's silly, Jesus have to tell us this. But why, if we're not gonna sell ourselves so cheaply? I mean, why it isn't silly is because guilt makes it all real. We just have to find problems. We can't exist without problems. We have to project the guilt. It's unconscious. We just have this need for it. We always have to hate somebody. I have seen myself, just going about my day, and then there comes up. I remember an instance some years ago. It comes up that a person that did something, and it had nothing to do with my life now, and it came up, and I got angry, but at the same time as I got angry, I was like, I mean, it's amazing because it has nothing to do with my life. Everything was, fine. And all I could see something come out of the blue. It's not out of the blue. I got scared of the love in my true mind, not Hakim. The true mind got afraid of the love and said, "No, bring the ego back in." And it just came up with any reason it could, and so that's what we do every time. Yeah.
Amazing.
Mm.
Yeah, I was thinking about one of the lessons that I was looking at today. By grace I live, and by grace I am released. And just thinking, how incredibly powerful that is. And there, but for the grace of God, go I. When you do start to recognize the oneness with everybody, and you're not buying into the stories that would justify you feeling sorry for somebody who's homeless, or somebody who's in a terrible situation in a family, or with bereavement or stuff, and you realize how this path that you walk, you are so graced to be walking your own path, and to have done the work that you've already done, so that the lessons do strike the chords that they strike for you. And there's the grace is absolutely in, it's just such an important part of it, to feel it, to feel the graciousness of everything, and to be able to use it so that you can bridge that phase of the metaphysics, and being of this world, being in this world. Was it in the Bible? I think it says, be in this
Yeah.
world, but not of this world, just
Right.
incredibly
Exactly.
powerful. And grace is like such a wonderful tool to help you navigate that, so that you can operate in a way that doesn't make you some sort of cold-hearted, aloof, spiritually bypassing, as people like to say these days, um, the trials and tribulations of your fellow man, really, because if we go for a percentage game, then most people believe they're in the world, and most people believe there's pain in the world and there's suffering, and they believe it's causing their discomfort internally. So, for people, we can't go wandering out amongst them trying to tell them that what they're feeling isn't real and isn't justified. And it makes me think of something from the course that I pulled up the other day, where it says, Heal your brothers simply by accepting God for them. Your minds are not separate, and God has only one channel for healing because he has but one son.
Right, right. And, you know, if we see other people suffer, I mean, the real suffering is to say that no matter what we experience, the real suffering is to say that what I'm experiencing is bad. That's the real cause of suffering. To judge it, you spoke about grace from the course. By grace I live, something like that, right? But this is not popular to say in spiritual, circles. But there is, in a way, a certain grace in suffering because you can learn from it. If it's already happening, why couldn't the Holy Spirit use it? So let's circle back to when I said, God, I'm still not happy. I would say that I understand the course and I still not happy. I just lost my train of thought for a moment. It's the
Grace.
yeah. I forget, but it's still like no matter what I go through. Yeah, let's say I don't feel the happiness, right? But then I have said that's a problem. That's the problem. To Ken had a woman asked Ken once. She said something like, "I was in Brazil, and every night when I was about to sleep, I saw homeless cats outside, and it was just raining on them. There was no roof for them. They were just sitting there, and the rain was just hitting them hard every night." And he said, it's a part of you that's you see yourself in the cats, right? And to just make my point come across, we could say it's helpful to think of it this way. How do we know that the cats suffer? Even if they would start talking English and say, I actually suffer, Hakim, you're wrong. The true part of them is not suffering, because the true part is out of the dream, right? So it's literally like this. Say, I'm outside of the dream now, and now I'm in the dream. And I say, look, Leon, I'm suffering. This is real. Look what's happening. It's raining on me. But that part that's outside of the dream, it's still there, but it's quiet. So no matter what we see, we can just stick to, okay, I might not feel totally happy. I'm actually worried, but don't make that into a problem either. Why do I have to judge it as bad? And you have to, psychologically, you have to tickle yourself. You have to say, I cannot be serious about this. I mean, you have to bring some levity, because the part of us that's outside the dream, it's all about levity.
Brilliant. It's interesting that, excuse me. It's interesting that Rupert keeps popping up this evening, because I was just thinking of one of the times when I've been to see him, and he was talking about, 90% of people who come to spiritual paths, their motivation is suffering. And in his experience, only 10% of people come almost with just a sense of inquiry, of just like, oh, what's this all about? But, for 90% of people.
Right, right.
And I've also known people who've been in prison and, reflected back on that time. And also the same principle for someone who was homeless, and to look at that situation and think, oh my God, that person's in prison. Oh my God, that person's homeless. And they found that it was it was a very comfortable experience because it was very simple,
mm,
in terms of like the responsibility of planning for the future or thinking long term. It's just, it's like, right,
mm.
I'm here, I'm now, I just need my next meal, okay, I'm here, I'm now, I'm going to sleep in a while, or, just that
Right.
that's their direct information of what they experienced in that situation that you could quite easily project onto them. This like, this heartstrings like, oh, are you okay? It's like, of course, everything's all right.
Right. And imagine if a person is not in prison, they might be more focused with the world. But the situation of being imprisoned might focus you inwards. And that might be of a whole, you could say that's a holy purpose, right?
Mm.
So, who's to say, as the Course says, how can we judge situations and at the end of the day? And, uh, if we take my life, I would say that I find it exciting where I am, talking with you and putting out a book, but I still have in the back of my mind, you know, let's say things are not working out. Is it still okay? I just don't want to be dependent on anything.
Yeah.
At the same time, I enjoy it, but I could see myself, if focusing a lot on what I have to do, try to promote the book, but I still try to balance it out with a little bit of, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because, as I said, look, it's exciting. So I can see myself imagining future scenarios.
Mm.
Oh, and it's exciting to have another book out, right?
Mm.
But I still have to say, the peace of God can be here and now.
Mm.
I have to take it back, take it back, take it back. So it goes for even bad times as well as good times. That that you still say, God is not in the future; He's here. And the more we're actually awaiting the future or a good thing to happen, a change in our life, it's just a prolonging of not choosing God right now.
Mm.
So, if we really want to be happy right now, we can say it like this. Once again, the gentleness of the Course. God, I know you can be here right now in my heart. I don't like you. I don't want you. I want to focus on the future. But at least I can be honest about I can have you here. Let's start, very gently.
Mm.
Then with that understanding, we just call things for what they are. Eventually it will become no, no, no. You know what? I want to stay with the present right now.
Mm.
Helen, she had this dream of before, scribing the course of she had a scroll. She could, if she turned to the right, she could
Oh yeah.
see the future and the left the past. What did she do? She didn't roll it out. She said, "I stick with the present." That's almost like saying, that's saying, I choose God not right now.
Mm.
Forget the future. And you know what the future is? I will become sick. I will die. That's at the end of the day. That will happen. So why not just stick with what works? What works is God.
Mm. Makes me think of Bill and his Lord, Lord, I'm here.
Yeah.
This thing, this. I'm not sure if it was a poem a prayer that came through, especially for Bill. I think Helen was sort of saying, chatting to him, and he was going, I never hear the answer from the Holy Spirit or Jesus, whatever symbol you like to use, but that was the message that came for Bill through Helen. It's the simple thing to say, Lord, I'm here.
All right. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, how beautiful. I think, yeah, that's been an absolutely gorgeous conversation. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same. I mean, it's always nice to talk to you.
Mm.
I'm very happy for this opportunity too, actually. So, yeah.
Yeah, likewise. I always enjoy our interactions, and I do feel like there's going to be a huge benefit for people to discover your work. And yeah, as I've said to you before, however gentle and flexible and flowing my energy and presence can be, people who know me very well will know that I can be really fixed and just like, nope, I'm not doing that.
Mm.
For me to read, to nearly finish reading your book is a evidence of the fact that that the book is that compelling for me to want to read it. So yeah, I'm hoping that other people, or I'm trusting, trying to swap the word hoping for trusting lately. I
Mm.
trust that other people will find that value in it too, and yeah, to be able to help that process is yeah, a great honor for me. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not gonna talk too much, but I want to say that, as when we started our conversation today, we talked about right-minded impulses. I think that those impulses are not for me alone. So we can trust that if we have them, it must mean that it will serve others too. But once again, we just we have to be aware of the expectations. What others, how many others? Maybe it's just a few. Okay, then
yeah.
that's it. Can I be okay with that? Then it's what it is.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm really glad that you brought that up because that was something that was running in my mind when you were talking about that, which is like being aware of the fact that we have to be equally comfortable with whatever outcome because that's got nothing to do with us. And it reminded me of like how I wrote my album, telling the story of my life, with Warm Rain, and I wrote it for me. You've wrote your book for you. You like to organize information in a particular way that you can reference it, so it's sequential, so it's logical, and so that you find pleasure in moving through that information that has had a huge effect on you.
Hmm.
Because Ken's work is just so profound and wonderful, and it's the same principle. You wrote your book for you. I wrote my album for me, and for maybe like just because of the way the script played out, for a few years the album was finished but wasn't ready to be released because of certain situations. And that really helped to highlight it for me that, this is just mine. This is for me to listen to over and over and over again, and to, like, as a friend of mine said, to sort of purge through listening to it,
Hmm.
be able to move through the journey of this story, um, and to be able to follow the ups and downs of the emotional twists and turns with an unmovable kind of presence, from, like the course would say, like the changeless dwelling place, or
Hmm.
from above the battleground, to the point where, again, as my same friend said to me, it's like we fly, we fly above the battleground like an eagle, and you keep your chin up and you keep your eyes forwards and enjoy that moment. And because that is where you are, but every now and then, you'd be a
Peeping down. Or,
yeah, and seeing your shadow moving through the world. And
hmm.
it's like, oh, no, 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 don't watch your shadow moving through the world. Chin up, keep your eyes forward.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
So yeah, equally comfortable with however it's used. And
Hmm.
even if you can't even say even if, because if that album that I'd written, if the book that you've written only clears the interference in our localized consciousness, then it's done the job. Because, to go back to that, heal your brothers simply by accepting God for them. Your minds are not separate, and God has only one channel for healing because he has but one son. That ties in with why it's stressed to us, is like, all you have to do is accept your part in the atonement. And what is atonement? It's undoing. Undoing what? Undoing what never was.
Yeah.
Removing your investment in the tiny mad idea that you could be separate, that you could exist somewhere outside of the mind of God. It's like, of course you can't, but don't feel bad about it. Don't feel guilty about it. You had a mad thought. That was over in an instant. It wasn't true. It wasn't possible. So there you go. Have some fun.
Exactly. I love that lightheartedness you bring. Yeah, can use it when you appeared on my channel. I complimented you on your voice, but it's also your smile. We can take that into our lives. When we have disturbing thoughts, we could remember this smile, not taking the tiny mind ideas seriously. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I understand
Oh,
we're running so late. You have work today, and we're talking at late, so
it's cool,
it's
man.
yeah.
It's cool. Don't worry. Don't allow yourself to engage with that. As I said to you, I don't do anything I don't want to do.
Ah, okay, okay, yeah,
We're
yeah,
comfortable. Everything's okay. We're here now. And yeah, really, really beautiful conversation. And I'm very grateful for that moment when you decided to act on the impulse to reach out, and where it's brought us to this far. And hopefully we'll meet up maybe next month, seeing how
yeah.
things go. You're going to Germany to talk about your book at the Wunderfest. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah, brilliant.
yeah. And I
So
hope you come too. I know you talked. Maybe you're coming. So
mm,
yeah, amazing.
yeah. So Hakim, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for reaching out when you did all those months ago, and here we are now benefiting from that, and
Mm.
that hope that the light of our conversation illuminates other people's minds when they watch this, and that it leads them to your wonderful work, and that we all keep spreading the joy and the light.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. All right then. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful time to spend with you, really. All right. So
Amazing. By grace we live, by grace we are released.
definitely.
Take care.
Take care. Good
Bye.
night. Bye.